psychology around how to be a great personal trainer, which again is just really getting good at failure because it happens every day. And if it's not happening every day, then I would actually argue you're probably not putting yourself out there.
Welcome to Smittyville, the smartest small town in fitness. Real talk for real trainers. Hosted by Chris Smith, CEO of Fitness World, and fitness business journalist Krissy Vann. This is the show for personal trainers. We talk business, leadership, money, and the stuff no one teaches you on the gym floor. Welcome to Smittyville, Population Trainers. Let's start in Town Hall. This is where we talk about the things that actually shape a career in fitness. I've sat with you in a room of your personal trainers that go to the Personal Training Institute, which is your school. And it's a story that comes up a lot because I think a lot of young individuals that have goals for themselves can really relate when they hear somebody that's willing to share, hey, I had this vision, I had this dream for myself, and it didn't quite work out the way I planned. So for those that aren't familiar with the Christmas story, what happened there?
In terms of training as a collegiate athlete, trying to make professional football, those were my goals and ambitions and dreams at the time. And training 3 times a day, eating nearly 12,000 calories a day, kind of blood, sweat, tears, you name it, all going into one thing to try to get there. And, I was fortunate. I was seeing scouts every week and, doing different kinds of mental aptitude and IQ testing and physical testing, people watching practices, scouts being at games. And I really felt like I had a chance. So much so that, I was having numerous agents contact me, wanted to be my representation and whatnot. So then I eventually even hired an agent and was working real hard to become a professional athlete and doing everything necessary and needed that I could hope for or want to do. And then just really kind of one day I had one of the bigger scouts that at this point I'd probably had 3 or 4 different conversations with him. Like he'd been out to see me a few times. And this is really, I think in probably March of that year, the NFL draft is in April. And he came out to say, hey, I don't think you're actually going to get drafted. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, the more work we've done, the more that I've come to understand, like you're not as coachable as we would want. And he was actually with the Buffalo Bills, I believe, was like the team he represented. And I was like, well, I'm not sure I'm understanding. Like, I was a 4.0 student. I was like an academic All-American, strength conditioning, super strong, all kinds of good stuff. But then to have someone says, yeah, but what we're hearing is that you might not be as coachable as we need. And we don't have time for that in the NFL. We don't have time for guys with even the littlest of an attitude problem at that stage, right? And I was pretty confused, right, really. So I went to my head coach and my defensive coordinator and even my position coach, say, what did you guys share? And they said, we just told them the truth. And I'm like, well, what's the truth? And they're like, Chris, you're amazingly talented and you're this and this, that. But like, do you not remember this? And do you not remember this? Like, we have to maintain relationships with these scouts when you go. Like, and they trust us on these types of decisions and when our credibility matters too. So, those things all happened, right? And I was like, yeah. And they were wrong. And it was issues of like me having a bad attitude at a practice or being a bad teammate at a particular time, even if it's a moment in time. And it might have just been like an example, but that's what they're asking. Has there ever been a time where Chris lost his temper on a teammate? Has there ever been a time where you felt like Chris wasn't coachable or didn't receive coaching in a good way? Like whatever questions they asked, but it led them to a path to go, yeah, well, they're going to draft this kid, which ultimately is what happened. I ended up not getting drafted. I had some free agent tryouts, workouts, different things. But it just didn't happen for me that way. I ended up going to play arena football, trying to chase the dream of the NFL still. Ended up with a couple more tryouts, but it never happened. And so ultimately, because I was a freak athlete, big dude. And so ultimately, it was my attitude and just the way that I was approaching things. And I was probably just too big for my britches in the sense of I had way too much ego and pride tied up into what I was doing. So yeah, ultimately it was me who probably kept me out of fulfilling my own dreams, right? Which was a tough pill to swallow as a, young man or, kind of growing up and trying to figure things out.
Without question, especially the level of dedication that you have to put into pursuing something like that, it would have been devastating. But naturally, and through the episodes of the podcast, we'll talk about the pivot that leads to personal training, moving up the ranks exceptionally quickly. What was it, by 30 VP?
Yeah, I was a vice president for fitness when I was 30 years old.
And then obviously now CEO, running successful gym chains, really in an exciting time period of expansion. So I'm curious, that early failure, how do you feel going through that has given you an edge as a leader?
Yeah, I think it's about resilience, right? It's just about, what does your resiliency look like and how do you learn? And everything's a learning opportunity or a growth opportunity or can be. if you allow it to be, or you can extract the lessons necessary and figure out like, what do I do and how do I pivot? Or, for every step I'm taking back, can I take two forward, and trying to figure that out. And so, yeah, that was part of my journey in doing that. And that was probably I wouldn't even say the first evolution of that. I mean, my parents were divorced when I was 12 years old. My oldest brother went to live with my father. I stayed at home with the other siblings, and, my mom was trying to go back to school and do some things. So I was at home at night doing homework and making dinner. And so I was forced to mature and grow, from kind of an early age, and kind of already had maybe some early lessons that helped me maybe even as I then got older, in terms of some of the other experiences I had in my own life and my story, that prepared me to kind of be resilient, if you will, in terms of, not getting maybe what you want, but figuring out how to make the best of it.
Resilient, but then it also makes sense why maybe some of the quote unquote uncoachable qualities would come to the surface, because anyone that's young, that's going through those types of things, most will create a shell of some sort. I mean, we had a conversation before we started the podcast here where you're like, I don't want to feel angry. And I'm sure that it still comes up at times in life. So why is that something that you're looking at tackling now in your life?
Well, I have 5 children, and they're all grown, and I've been married for, 31 years now. And so I'm just in a new chapter, a new phase of my life with, my wife and whatnot. So it's just trying to figure out how to continue to be happy. I mean, the Tim McGraw song is like, in your first 30 years. And for people that don't know that song, it's a country song. I listen to country music. The song was your first 30 years. I'm more focused, I guess, at this point in what I would call my last 30 years. And, hopefully I'll live past 81 years old or whatever that might be. But yeah, just how can I be the most productive person in every way possible? So that's, as a husband, as a father, as a, boss, as an entrepreneur, as a partner, whatever it is, in whatever capacity. I just want to be the best version of myself that I can be. And so, yeah, I've been doing a lot of me work with even other professionals to kind of help me identify like where I'm weak, if you will, and where I can be stronger, what I can learn from, what I can reflect on. And so, yeah, that's just kind of led me down a path of like, again, just getting perspective and gaining perspective to kind of continue to move forward in the way that I want to.
I asked that with intention only because we know, I mean, people can choose to become a personal trainer at any age. You see that in your school. But there's a huge population that are coming through your school that are Gen Z and getting started. And I know how I felt at that age was that everyone older than me had it figured it out. Like you think that there's the adults and then there's you scrambling to try and put it all together.
Sure.
And so what would be your advice to that age group in regards to that self-improvement pursuit?
I think the biggest thing I would say is the instantness of whatever the right vocabulary.
We can make up our own words here. It's our podcast.
Everyone wants everything too fast, right? The instantaneous nature of like, I want everything now. And back to like the TikToks and the Instagram, and I can get information now. I can go on formerly Twitter, now X, and get the news right now. And like whatever, everybody wants everything so quickly, which I can appreciate, but like anything worth having, generally speaking, takes time. So if you want a lot of money, not that many people win the lottery where instantaneously they're wealthy. It's making sound decisions, making good investments, living a frugal, within your means, so on and so forth. The compounding interest starts to work in your favor, so on and so on and so on. And then eventually you're like, oh, I'm doing okay here, right? So I just think the instantaneous nature of what everybody wants versus the reality of like what it is. So like, as an example, we teach SW, SW, SWN. Some will, some won't, so what, next. Some will, some won't, so what, next. Because our industry really is about failing forward. It's about every failure is a step actually in the right direction, meaning every no leads me to my next yes. But unfortunately, a lot of people, just in anything, it's not just personal training really, but anything in life, if you're told no enough times, it's like, well, gosh, this is really hard. I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. No one really likes being told no because it just doesn't feel good. But so then you stop, and it's the energy to stop. And so this generation in particular, I think is, even less equipped, if you will, to deal with failure. And so it's understanding. And so a lot of what we're doing is teaching them that. It's about how to, yes, write good programs and be attentive to your client, provide world-class customer service, and like all the things that go into like a great session. But as important, yes, we're having to, and it's okay because it's worthy to teach the psychology around like how to be a great personal trainer, which again is just really getting good at failure because it happens every day. And if it's not happening every day, then I would actually argue you're probably not putting yourself out there. You're not talking to enough people, making enough introductions. You're not servicing or helping change lives in a way where you're experiencing that. You're just kind of sitting back waiting for something to happen. But if you're putting yourself out there and constantly like talking to people and trying to find people to help and whatever, then you're going to experience failure like daily.
Let's head to the trainer circuit. Real questions, real situations. Chris shows up, listens, and mentors from experience.
Failures when you started with fitness world, and like what did that kind of look like for you when you were in the beginning of things?
I mean, I think with buying the business, you know, I think we got a lot of things right. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic at that time, right? 5 years ago when I bought it. You know, I bought it out of a bankruptcy through an asset purchase agreement. We got lucky, right? So luck is when hard work meets opportunity. That's my definition of luck. And, you know, we were fortunate to get a lot of great people to come work for us and come back to work for us. I can actually tell you there's a lot of people on my team right now today that told me they took the job because they just needed a job, and they actually didn't think the business had any chance of being successful. And so in many ways, I would actually say this is part of, for all of you, even your own trainer journey. So what made the business work? The people had to do the work, but someone has to have a vision. Someone has to be a source of inspiration and aspiration. And I fucking believed. So much so I borrowed $11 million. I borrowed $11 million to do it. And do you think I didn't believe? Do you think I borrowed $11 million and ran around going, I don't know, guys, we'll just flip a coin and see what happens today. Hopefully it works out. No, it was like, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to be pumped. We're going to be excited. We're going to talk to more people. We're going to do this. We're going to clean this. We're going to do that. We're going to spend money on this. We're going to refurbish this. We're going to get all this equipment. We're going to redistribute across all the clubs. We're going to repaint every single club. We're going to rebrand every club. We're going to come up with a new logo, a new concept to this. We're going to light them differently. We're going to put in recovery of $500,000 in, you know, every single club. We're going to put in, you know, tanning and hydro massage. Somebody's got to do it. And that was me. I was that guy. And so to me, it was less about what mistakes I made, truthfully, and there's a lot of things I got right. And I'm not saying that to be like boisterous or braggadocious or whatever else. I'm saying that that was 25 years in the making of my 30-year career, right? I made plenty of mistakes along the way, and I'd learned from a bunch of those mistakes. So now it was, what have I learned along those 25 years that now I don't need to make those same mistakes? And if I was to apply that to you as a trainer, it's, look, it doesn't matter what your fitness manager thinks of you. You can be like, I don't really like my fitness manager and I don't think they like me. Doesn't matter. If you're gonna let that dictate your success in the club as a personal trainer, if you actually, like mentally, you think that that might be an issue for you, I'm telling you, you're gonna fail now. I'll tell you right now. You're like, well, I like my manager, but I don't like my district manager. I don't like Darb. I don't feel like Darb and I are vibing. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. What matters is you and your passion for like helping people and changing lives and making a difference. Like if you can't show up to work every day and be pumped and excited, getting out of the car, then something's wrong with you. So if I don't have a positive attitude, then my ability to achieve great things is massively diminished. And so I was able to learn that early on in my life, and I've just applied it throughout, and it's like compounding interest as far as I'm concerned.
Before we wrap, we'll leave you with a Smithism, a lesson Chris has picked up along the way.
Today's lesson, I'm going to give it kind of twofold. So I'm going to give you kind of two. I'm going to kind of throw you off a little bit. So people always say, is knowledge power? And everyone will raise their hands when I talk to young trainers as an example, say, yeah, knowledge is power. And I go, wrong, 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 right? The application of knowledge is power. Knowledge in itself is not power. It's what you do with that information that is relevant and that actually matters. And so I share that back to the story that we shared earlier today around the resiliency and the failure and whatever. And so it was actually taught to me, I think when I was 14 years old, I learned a phrase of your attitude will determine your altitude. And so again, in that story, the narrative there is, unfortunately, I didn't have the best control of my attitude at all times. And that probably ultimately cost me one of my big goals and dreams. Whereas then I would say then as I got into my professional career and the corrections that I was able to make around keeping my self in the best place possible, being positive as often as possible, back to having a positive attitude, right? And again, an attitude of gratitude. I go on and on. But your attitude determines your altitude, like how far you can go. And I would even say how fast you can get there, right? Because now you start to show people like, wow, that person's always positive. They've always got like an answer to like kind of keep things moving. They're never really complaining about things. Because it's like, who can complain? Anyone can complain. You can complain every day if you want to, but what good does it do, right? What direction is that taking you mentally? So today's one, I would say, is your attitude determines your altitude.
That's today's Smithism. Chris Smith is the mayor of Smittyville, and I'm Krissy Vann, your town correspondent. This is the smartest small town in fitness. We'll see you back here every other week.